Okay, here we go, guys. Week 9. We only have, 10, 11, and 12 left. So yeah, week 9, we're finally into modernism, so I do have to talk about modernity a little more directly and head on. I'm going to try to make this a quick and succinct video. But modernity is here in all of its, glory, if you will. I will be posting the final paper in the next couple days, but as of right now, the discussion board questions are there, and of course, you have this video. So you want to make sure you do get started on this. It is a difficult read. I gotta say, I'm not trying to intimidate anyone, but Virginia Woolf is difficult, and this is one of the longer reads of the semester as far as the week load goes. So definitely don't try to put the reading off until the end of the week. I would try to chip away at this. I mean, it's a little over 100 pages in our volume, in this bad boy. So, I mean, if you read like 20 pages a day, you'd probably be on a pretty good pace. But that's up to you to figure out, right? You guys know how you read better than I do, but I would think 20 to 30 pages a day is probably good. I might even up it a little bit if you can. Anyway, I guess since I'm already talking about the reading a little more directly than modernity, the only other thing I guess I should mention is just fair warning, there are no chapters. Some of you might have been a little frustrated by the, 60 pages of Heart of Darkness with only 3 chapters. It's gigantic chapters. There are no chapters here. There are some little white space breaks, but this thing flows, baby. So I guess you got to figure out where breaking spots are for you. Anyway, we'll circle back to what that might look like in a little bit. Virginia Woolf, though, she's our writer of the week, and just a quick what's the word I want? Just a quick biographical blurb, if you will. Born in, I can't even read that date that I have down here. 1882, she dies in 1941, which, you might think, people back then didn't, that's 20th century. People do start living a lot longer, even on average. It's just that she drowned herself in a river in 1941. Allegedly, I don't know, books I've seen say that she was really dreading World War II and thinking that England wasn't going to win, but that might be unfair. She also had many instances of mental breakdowns throughout her life, so I think probably mental health was just an issue for her, and sometimes, unfortunately, that's what happens. But she grew up actually in a quite privileged situation. I mean, if you want to be a writer, you couldn't have a better situation. Her mother's family was a big publishing family. Her father was a literary critic of Victorianism, which of course she thought was like so passé, like so yesterday. So she was a little embarrassed of his views on literature, but that doesn't mean she didn't get set up for success by this family. She was abused by her brother, so we don't want to overlook that. It's not like everything is all peaches and cream for people, even when they have privileged upbringings and situations. So that's, obviously that's probably a big contributing factor to her mental health issues. But she wound up becoming a big part of the literary intelligentsia of England throughout her life. She was friends with the great novelist E.M. Forster, the great economist John Maynard Keynes, for whom Keynesian economics is named. He's the guy who's basically still hugely influential on how governments try to help the economy during downturns and things like that. The people she hung with were all very cosmopolitan and sexually liberated, which is wild because we're talking really, the time this book is published, 1925, we're talking about, for the most part, after World War I. There's a huge time of literary, just modernity, explosiveness. Between the wars is a great period to study. Between World War I and World War II, so much cool literature comes out across the English-speaking world. And she's a big part of that. She's got this Bloomsbury group. They're all very good, sexually liberated people having relationships with one another, really regardless of gender identities. She herself was a bisexual. So you'll see some of that, I think. weaving its way through this story that we'll read. But I guess that's enough for her. Well, it's not. We could say more, but I'm trying to keep the video short. Modernity itself, though. Here we go. Modernity, basically what's happening is you'll have this is the first story, I believe, that we've read with anybody having an electric light, like a lamp, because we know it. Electricity is becoming part of the world. There's a whole big scene where someone's got a car. I mean, still wealthy people are the only ones with cars, but we've got cars now. We got electricity. We're thinking total modern world in many of the ways. They also have wireless communications, lots of things that are, I don't think there's any telephones in here yet, but we're getting there, you know? And so what happens with people after this, and especially World War I did a big job on this, is that people started to realize just how frail everyone was. We felt not only as the Victorians started to, but real hardcore disconnect from the past. Just this total feeling of alienation, no more connectivity to the past. Everything is about newness. And to that end, Virginia Woolf also was of this feeling, as many were as far as critics go, because she contributed a lot of literary criticism to the discussion of her time. There was this feeling that the novel was washed up, that it needed to be reinvented, that all the old methods were played out, frankly. So you'll see her experimenting hardcore with what a novel can be in this book. And some of you are not going to like it, I'm sorry. Because she's not too concerned with plot. She's not as concerned with exterior, outside events happening. There are outside events. Maybe one big one, unless you count a party as a big one. Obviously, there's going to be a party. That's no spoiler. The very first line of the story tells you that she's going to go get some flowers for her party that she's throwing. So there's a party. There's like maybe one other big event. And then other than that, there's really not much of a plot. What we have is, what she thinks is important, is showing us the way people think. So yes, stream of consciousness is the term we want to use. There's a critic, I wish I could remember his name offhand, but one way to think about writing like this is to, we think about suspending our disbelief. If you're going to go watch a science fiction movie or something, just suspend your disbelief. None of this is possible or real, but we suspend our disbelief so that we can enjoy the story. Sometimes for stories like this, you have to suspend your need for everything to make sense. Just trust in the authority of the author. Trust that she will carry you through to a place that makes sense. Trust that everything will wind up wrapping up in a meaningful way. Just kind of go with it. Allow it to happen. Unfortunately, it's, like I said, going to flow straight through for over 100 pages with no chapter breaks. So it is plotlessness. There's plotlessness, in other words, and some people call this not really like realism because they feel like nothing's really happening and there's too much happening in the mind. But to people who write in this vein, there is an argument to be made that this is actually incredibly realistic, because this is how a lot of people walk through life. We're not just looking at things, we're thinking about things while we look at things. So to be able to read a story like this is a heightened form of realism. This is more real than any movie can ever get you, because without some kind of cheesy voiceover, we don't know what characters are thinking. We can only watch them do things, right? So this is completely the opposite of, say, like Hemingway, who's a contemporary of hers, who thought, I just want to show what happens. She's like, yeah, but I want to show you everything that happens, including what happens inside people's minds. And so you want to pay attention to, because we're not just in Mrs. Dalloway's head for the whole story. We're going to shift around, so pay attention to the breaks. There's going to be flashbacks too, because people will be thinking of the past as they walk through the present. That happens, right? So that's, again, this idea of I'm trying to show you what real life is like in text. So look out for that. One thing that unifies the story, so we know when we are, if we're in a flashback or if we're in the present, is the Big Ben. You guys have all probably seen a picture of it, even if you've never thought about what it is. This is the big clock tower in London. That thing will be chiming the hours throughout the story to let us know that we're back on the day in June that this all takes place in like 1923. Interestingly enough, sidebar, we're keeping track of the hours throughout the story. Michael Cunningham wrote a novel inspired by this book, and it's titled The Hours, which was made into a movie. You could watch it after you read this, though, because otherwise, I feel like you'll get more of the movie if you watch it after you read the book, because it's not just a retelling of this story, so you can't just watch that movie and be able to answer the discussion questions this week, but it's just an extra little thing like Apocalypse Now was, last week. You go watch it. You'll enjoy that movie more having done this kind of reading ahead of time, but it's not gonna suffice. But it is a difficult read, so give yourself time. I would say look for the literary allusions. Now that you've read a few things in British literature, a few weeks worth here, 8 weeks so far, you'll see things, references to Keats, not just mentioning that someone reads Keats, but like somebody will actually think about how beauty and truth are connected in this story. You'll see references to Conrad, a lot of stuff with the hollow men, like hollow men was a thing that Conrad coined and was actually kind of taken by T.S. Eliot at the same time as this book comes out. So Eliot wrote this whole poem called Hollow Men, and it's a reference to a couple of lines in Heart of Darkness, but the opening, I won't read the whole thing, it's just long, but he literally uses Mr. Kurt's He Dead, Eliot does, as a sort of epilogue to this, I don't know, like a quote before the poem. But some of this imagery he uses are things that I think also Woolf was thinking about too. And so I'm not saying one stole the other or was influenced by the other, but they had the same kind of reactions, right? So we are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Alas, our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass, or rat's feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. Shape without form, shape without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom, remember us, if at all, not as lost, violent souls, but only as the hollow men, the stuffed men. So, some of that stuff I think will be pertinent to what we read here this week as well. The imagery of hollowness repeats a lot throughout this story. Time is really important in this story, the effects of time, not just on the narrative, but on the people. And then there's also a repeated, continuous usage of waves and water metaphors and imagery. So those are things to think about as you read through it. In addition to, of course, I always suggest that you guys read the discussion questions or have them open or handy as you do the reading, because you'll be able to start marking passages and finding things that will correlate and help you answer those questions with quotes. And they might even wind up helping you on a final paper, which again, I'll be posting in the next couple days the prompt for. I guess the other thing, it's not a direct reference, but there are a few places in this story that I'm forced to think of the Lady of Shalott, the Tennyson poem. So those are things to think about maybe as you read through here. And then, yeah, we pretty much covered all the stuff you need to know. And then if I tell you much more, I'll start maybe accidentally spoiling things. But we've got all these different points of view, so do try to pay attention to the way different people see the same thing differently, because that's another huge thing that happens in this story. There's places where it might seem there are continuity errors, but if you think about it, it's not from the same person's point of view. So it's not a continuity error. Woolf did that on purpose. Different people remember different things. Different people will see the same thing happening at the same time differently, which is just a really modern way of thinking about the world too. So that's it. If you have any questions, of course, you have my email address and you should use it. Otherwise, yeah, try to enjoy it. Don't try to gulp it down fast. This is a kind of story that needs to be sipped. So make sure you're budgeting your time to do that. Otherwise, I guess I'll talk to you guys again next week.